friends. Welcome back to The Renewed Mind. I'm your host, Ashley Varner, and I'm so glad that you're here. This podcast is all about helping you to renew your mind so that you can live with confidence, purpose, and peace. Today, we're diving into a topic that I actually cover in my upcoming book, The Ultimate Influencer, and that's the lesser-known dangers of social media. We all know that it's a time waster. It's easy to scroll for 5 minutes and we look up and it's been an hour and we're just wondering where the time went. We don't have anything to show for it. We've just been mindlessly scrolling and being entertained. We all know it's a time waster, but the dangers of social media go much deeper than that. So today we're going to talk about how social media will distort your reality. We're going to talk about how undisclosed ads can really just sneak into our feeds without us realizing it. And we're going to talk about how social media has fueled this entitled look at me culture and discuss some of those things today. Of course, we're going to look at all of this through the lens of biblical wisdom. So I want you to grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's get into it. One of the biggest dangers of social media is that it creates this distorted view of reality. We see picture-perfect families and flawless skin. We see highlight reels of everybody's best moments. In the past, people used to keep up with the Joneses. It was all about keeping up appearances with the neighbors or maybe the people who you went to school with or you worked with. But now we are keeping up with the Joneses on a global scale. We're trying to keep up with people who we have no idea of their economic status, we don't know their background, and we're comparing our reality to a distorted view of reality of what's behind the scenes. What are the things that we don't see? We don't see the arguments behind closed doors, we don't see the unfiltered struggles, we don't see the messy homes, we don't see the exhaustion or the ruined vacations, all to get that perfect shot. Social media is like looking through a house of mirrors. You're seeing reflections, but none of them are real. And the enemy loves to use this distortion to make us feel like we're not enough, that we don't measure up, that our lives are somehow lacking because they don't look like the curated posts that we see online. Here's what Scripture says in 2 Corinthians 10:12. It says, "We do not dare to classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves. When they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they're not wise." We know that comparison is a thief. It robs us of gratitude, it robs us of joy, and it robs us of contentment with what we have. Social media is designed to fuel that comparison game because it's a dollar bottom line. And if we're not careful, it can lead us into deep dissatisfaction with our own lives. So you might be just fine with the new way that you decorated your home, and as soon as the trends change and you're seeing these perfect things on social media, all of a sudden what you really loved about your house, now you're discontent about because you're seeing and comparing yourself with other people online. Another subtle danger is the amount of undisclosed advertising that we're constantly exposed to. So I talk about this a little bit in my book, where we used to see an ad and know that it wasn't always 100% true, but we were okay with it because it was an ad. So think of the McDonald's ads with their French fries. And we knew that whenever we go into McDonald's and we get a medium order of fries, it doesn't look like it did on the TV ad. We know that because it's an ad. But now we're constantly exposed to undisclosed advertising. Social media influencers will promote products in such a casual and personal way that we don't even realize that we're being marketed to. Now, I'm not saying that all influencer marketing is bad or wrong, but when someone is recommending a product and they're not disclosing it properly, they're not being upfront that they're getting paid to recommend it, that's deceptive. And it's actually against marketing guidelines, and they can get in a lot of trouble. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 11:1, "The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with him." Honesty matters. It matters to God, but it also matters in marketing. And we've normalized this culture where trust is eroded because we don't know if someone genuinely loves a product or if they just love the paycheck that's attached to it. I'm thinking of a scandal involving a TikTok influencer where she was promoting a brand of mascara. And in the video, halfway through, she's not using the mascara that she's recommending. She's actually using a different kind of mascara. In another video, she actually put false lashes on in between the takes of putting mascara on to falsely advertise something that, one, she probably doesn't even use, and two, she's lying about what it can actually do. This is just one influencer example, but this attitude is really prevalent across the board. There are influencers who take on sponsorships, whether they actually use the products or not. And it's really hard to trust any influencer because you are expecting that they're just going to be selling you something to pad their pocket. Like I said, this is something that I explore a little bit more in The Ultimate Influencer. I talk about how Esther had influence, not because she was selling something, but because she was willing to sacrifice for something bigger than herself. True influence isn't about selling a product, it's about standing for something that's bigger than yourself. And Esther understood that. The final danger that I want to touch on today is how social media has fueled this entitled and self-absorbed culture. We see it everywhere, right? We see the obsession with brands. We see this personal branding or the need for validation from likes and comments. The way that people build entire identities around their online presence. It's sad to see this because I have followed influencers from the very beginning of either their ministry or just their online presence, and you can see a shift in their identity as they find maybe that one viral piece that they posted that went viral, and so they continued down that path even though it wasn't really what they started with. I think of one podcaster in particular who started in a very biblical manner, teaching women, helping moms. I had listened to her podcast very regularly, and then I took a little bit of a break and hadn't listened to her for a couple of years. And I thought of her and I thought, you know what, I would love to hear some of that encouragement to moms again. So I went back to her podcast a few years later and discovered that it was completely different from the roots that she had started from. And the only thing that I can think of that would cause such a big shift is the difference in her income coming from the podcast. She started having way more guests on there that were paying to be on the podcast and didn't really reflect the values that she had originally started with. And it was really sad to see. Another part of this look at me culture is the idea of keyboard warriors. People, not even just influencers, but just people in general on Facebook, friends and family, can take their frustrations out by becoming keyboard warriors. They're tearing other people down behind the screen because it's easier than in person. Jesus said in Matthew 12:36, "I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give an account for every careless word they speak." That includes the ones that we type. We live in a time where people are going to say things online that they would never say to someone's face. Social media has removed the human element from conversations, and it makes it easier to be harsh and critical and cruel. But as Christians, we're called to be different. We're called to be slow to speak, quick to listen, and be full of grace and have words that are full of grace. So instead of being known for our opinions, we should be known for our kindness. Now, I'm not saying that you can't ever have an opinion. I'm not even saying that you can't use social media to share that opinion. But what I am saying is we are accountable for every word that we say. And instead of tearing people down, we should be using our words, even as we're sharing opinions. Maybe they're political, maybe they're personal. Even as we're sharing those things, they should be with the motivation of building other people up. Your words, typed or spoken, will be accounted for. So we have to make sure to use them to build and not to break. Social media can make it feel like you know someone in the way that you would a personal friendship, a face-to-face relationship, when you really don't. We begin to get into the thinking that we know the person who we follow when we've never met them before. It's like a relationship that's one-sided. So they have no idea who we are, and we are now building this friendship, this relationship, this trust that's one-sided with them, where they can end up influencing us in any way that they choose, and it's not a true friendship, it's not a true relationship. So what do we do? Do we delete all of our social media accounts and move up to a cabin in the woods? Not necessarily, but we do need to use wisdom in how we use social media. We need to guard our hearts, we need to set boundaries, and we need to make sure ultimately that we are using social media instead of letting social media use us. If this is something that you've been struggling with, I really want to invite you to check out my new book. It's called The Ultimate Influencer: Lessons from Queen Esther. In it, I dive deeper into how we can navigate influence. I talk a lot about identity. We talk about purpose in a world that is constantly pulling us in different directions. The book comes out on March 15th, but you can get on the sneak peek waitlist right now and get a free devotional, exclusive pre-sale discount. So just go to ashleyvarner.com/Esther to sign up. And if you're listening to this after March 15th, you can still go to that link to grab your copy of the book. It's going to be in paperback form, ebook form, and also for the first time for one of my books, I have narrated the book myself, and I'm really excited to share it with you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really pray that this episode is challenging you and encouraging you to go beyond this world, to not conform to this world, but to be transformed by the way that you think. If it did encourage you, don't forget to share it with a friend who needs to hear it, and I will see you next time on The Renewed Mind. Have a great week.